thanks everybody for joining again. We're pretty excited about this topic, and the reason for it is because we actually see a lot of traction in the industry around Appium. It's pretty much become the one of the de facto tools for testing on mobile devices. Perfecto, we invested heavily in integrations with Appium, as well as enhancing it in a way that helps our customers automate. So with that being said, there's an agenda I kind of have for today. So I'll talk first about the kind of digital transformation context. So Appium is obviously is just a tool. It's just like Perfecto. It's just a technical solution. But they enable some of the key components of this digital transformation strategy for our customers. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time on outlining what those are and kind of putting the Appium in perspective. And then we'll talk a little bit about what Appium is and what are some of the strengths and limitations. I mean, Appium has enjoyed very wide adoption, so there's got to be some features that make it very compelling for organizations to use. But it's also had a fair share of its own problems and sort of limitations in terms of what it doesn't provide and what it doesn't do. So then we'll dive into who Perfecto is and how we work with Appium. And we'll talk about the benefits of using Perfecto and Appium together. And then, as Lizzie mentioned, Nick is going to do a little demo of our integration with Appium, because obviously a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we can show you how this actually would work in a real world scenario. So in terms of the digital transformation, what we see our customers going through is and this is happening across multiple industries, multiple organizations that we encounter. It's really the fact that physical experience and interaction is given away to digital, right? And it kind of goes without saying, everybody is familiar with that. But there's a few ways in which it's happening. So first of all, digital is an omni-channel strategy, which basically means that it's not just about mobile, it's not just about web, it's about a combination of all the different ways in which users and consumers can interact with the digital presence of a company. Right? And then mobile, interestingly, is pretty much becoming, or has become already, the first screen among connected consumers. So all of these digital platforms are merging effectively into one experience. And what customers are expecting is that experience is very cohesive, regardless of the point of entry into the digital presence of an organization. Right? So to give you an example, I am an Amazon customer. I always buy stuff from Amazon, and I might start doing some work on my iPhone because somebody mentioned, for instance, a book or a device, and then when I'm at home, go on my tablet, and then finally complete that particular transaction, based on what I put in my cart and some of the research and the user reviews that I've read on maybe a big browser. Right? So I expect that when I'm entering into this digital interaction with Amazon, I don't have hiccups as I transition between these different modes of a digital interaction. And then another very sort of interesting component here is that as customers, and as consumers, we demand exceptional digital experience, regardless of the conditions in which a particular mobile device is when we're interfacing with the digital presence of the company. And those conditions can vary, right? For instance, the device could be, in poor networking conditions. It's not always going to be on a great LTE connection. Sometimes it will be on 3G. Sometimes there will be some applications that are running on the background and maybe consuming some resources, maybe consuming CPU memory, or grabbing to the camera. We will be traversing different locations. So, for instance, here you can see Waze application as it's moving through through heavy traffic downtown Manhattan. And also, all of these things are amplified by the fact that there is often very heavy traffic that puts additional load on the back end. So all of these things they kind of amplify, and they essentially mean that traditional understanding of whether something is working or not working from purely functional perspective is no longer sufficient. As an organization that cares about quality and velocity of delivering features to customers, every one of our customers cares that their application works under the variety of these environmental conditions, not just simply an happy path scenarios. So how do we ensure that these different facets of digital experience can be consistently delivered across a variety of these digital, digital properties? There's fundamentally three key enablers for this exceptional digital quality, right? So at the very sort of foundational level, there is an enterprise-grade device lab. So that you need to have a lab that provides immediate, reliable, and secure access to mobile devices and web browsers across all required platforms. And this needs to happen in a 24/7 fashion. The reason why you need that type of lab is because it dramatically reduces the span, management span, and it more importantly even, it enables the higher level of automation, right, test automation. So the next level is robust automation. The robust automation requires the lab in order to be effective. But it also provides an unattended parallel automation that needs to cover the full scope of functional as well as non-functional requirements. And, the benefit here is that rather than, have a very heavy load of manual testing, that can be avoided by shifting into the automated way of testing without compromising quality. And finally, once an organization has this robust automation set up, maybe it's set up as a continuous integration or continuous delivery pipeline, there is a lot of reports that get produced as a result of running tests, a lot of success reports or a lot of failure reports, and it's very important to be able to aggregate these reports and provide a both high-level view into the full scope of digital quality across all of the platforms, as well as being able to drill down very quickly into specific test results and really quickly identify issues earlier, potentially into the software development lifecycle, prioritize triage, and then fix the defects again across the full digital domain. So with that being said, right, this is kind of the context in which Appium came to exist. So Appium is really an automation tool that sits in this kind of middle pillar here, which is the robust automation. So what is Appium? At a very, very basic level, it's a tool for automated testing of application on mobile devices. And it was created as an open source alternative to existing commercial tools. It's enjoyed wide adoption, and the reason for it is because it has some really powerful benefits, some really powerful features. So first of all, it's cross-platform in the sense that you can write tests against multiple platforms using the same set of APIs. So this is really helping with scripter, with an automation engineer productivity, because they, essentially can create a single script that can go across multiple platforms. It's also non-intrusive. A lot of alternative tools out there in the industry, they require applications to be modified, recompiled, sometimes require access to the application source code. And all of these things essentially introduce a delta, right? Anytime you instrument the application, you are effectively going away from the real experience of the end user that will run an unmodified, uninstrumented version of that application in the wild on their real device. So Appium doesn't require any of these sort of modification of the applications. It just allows you to go and test those applications as if though in the conditions in which you will ship it to end users. It's also very open, so you can automate using any language and framework, and it's based on industry standard Selenium WebDrivers. So there is a lot of training, ready scripts, there's a lot of information out there that is written for Selenium, and a lot of this knowledge base can be reused if you're starting or if you're an organization that's have adopted Appium. And it's also supported by a wide community because it's an open source project. So again, a lot of these features made Appium a very compelling choice for the organizations as they're embarking on an automation journey. It has very low entry point because it's a free tool, so there's no additional investment that's required. And it gives some of the immediate kind of results and some of the immediate benefits from adopting it, which is why a lot of organizations have chosen. At the same time, Appium is not perfect, and there is actually quite a number of limitations that it has. So let's look at some of these limitations. Well, the first one is, ironically, the benefit of the Appium being an open source tool is also a little bit of its downfall, which is it doesn't have kind of any official support when something goes wrong. One of the interesting comments that I've read many times on many forums and sort of user groups in Appium is this complaint that I'm experiencing unexpected, unexplained errors. And I'm banging my head against the wall, and I cannot quite find what exactly is wrong. So if you're on an open source project, who do you call? Well, you're kind of on your own, right? You need to do your own investigation and try to fix things on your own and maybe go to the forums and get support like that. So there's no commercial kind of model for supporting Appium. It also, because of this open source model, it's kind of on a best effort type of scenario. The development is done, which basically means that anytime a new operating version is coming out, there is usually a delay. So we'll talk about that in more detail. But for iOS, sometimes it can take months, weeks and months to get support for new operating system. There's also no OS level or environmental controls in Appium. So basically what that means is that testing outside of the application context is impossible, right? So you remember how we talked about the overall digital experience? That is something that is difficult to achieve if you just have Appium. It's very difficult to break out of the context of the application when you receive, for instance, an interrupt, maybe an SMS message or an OS level pop-up that requires action from the user. Appium doesn't have visibility in these types of events. So if your application requires that type of interaction, you won't be able to automate that specific use case if you are using pure Appium. There's also no environmental controls, right? So things like changing the GPS conditions, network conditions, kind of overlaying a variety of those end user environmental conditions on top of the use case, Appium doesn't provide these types of capabilities. So if you need to test those applications under that type of stress and the load, you can't. It also has object level recognition only and no ability to visually validate user experience. And again, if you kind of read the forums in Appium, this is one of the main complaints about, in terms of the limitations of the capabilities, the fact that you cannot actually visually validate what's happening on screen. Right? It's also somewhat unreliable, right? We already talked about the fact that it's a little bit flaky, and it has these unexplained kind of failures, and there is defects that cause test failures. It's also very difficult to configure parallel execution in a reliable fashion with Appium. It has some limitations in this respect, and it's not built really for enterprise-grade parallel automation on multiple devices at the same time. It's more of a single-threaded kind of model. There's also some of the negative productivity impact on the automation testers. Part of it is that Appium doesn't have any reporting capabilities. So if you need to create a report as the output of your tests, you're on your own. You have to build your own reporting, or you have to use some of the other third-party solutions, but Appium in and of itself does not provide any. And then there's also no IDE plugins for Appium, right? So it kind of slows down the script creation. So all of these various things are limitations of Appium, and you might ask a legitimate question. Well, what does that actually mean from the perspective of the users that are embarking on this automation journey? What is the impact of lack of some of these capabilities, right? Like, for instance, no OS level or environmental control. Why is that important to our customers? Well, it turns out that it's actually very important. So I'll cover a few of these, not every single bullet point, but a few of these and kind of talk about the impact, right? So at the very fundamental level, Appium doesn't address the problem of providing the enterprise-grade lab. So, there is a lot of complexity that's involved in building a lab that consists of web browsers, mobile devices, wearables for a variety of different platforms and operating systems. And, Appium, being an automation tool, obviously would not have access to any of these kind of things in and of itself. There's other components that are involved in that foundational lab, right? So it's a hardware and software setup. You need people who provide continuous 24/7 support, as well as it needs to be a secured environment. So there's firewalls, there's VPN tunnels, SSO that are involved in setting up an enterprise-grade lab that can support high level of secure, parallel, unattended automation, right? So Appium needs this as the foundation in order to be able to do its job effectively. So this is something that is not part of this Appium solution and something that needs to be provided separate. Additionally, I want to kind of highlight the point that we talked about the fact that Appium actually doesn't provide support for new operating systems as they hit GA. And that is very important. It's very important for a lot of our users, especially users that are in some type of BYOD, bring your own device situation, or maybe they're a retailer or maybe in some other vertical, industry vertical where the users in the wild update to new devices very quickly. So let me give you one example. If we look at the kind of mobile market calendar for 2016, so this is when different versions of the operating systems were released throughout the year, we see that the iOS beta was released in June, and it went GA in September, right? So this is iOS 10. And then the Appium actually introduced support only in October for iOS 10. So effectively, if you're an organization and you need to test on iOS 10, if you're purely using Appium, you're essentially looking at 120 days without iOS 10 support. Now, why is that important? Well, that's important because during that period, according to stats, 54% of iOS users have upgraded to iOS 10. So essentially, you have a gap as an organization. You have a gap when you're not testing on a predominant operating system for 120 days. For a lot of our customers, that is simply unacceptable duration of time, right? They need to start testing actually on betas so that when iOS 10 or the next version of iOS or Android hits GA, their application is already prepared for it. And then another thing that I want to kind of point out is that the lack of robust automation at the sort of visual validation and OS level controls level in environmental conditions limits the amount of automation coverage. So what is automation coverage? It's ability to automate the full test suite that you have. Here's an example of one of our customers that one of their web presence, they have a test case. It's a fairly simple test case that basically say that when the user is presented with a page where they need to provide a postal code, there's a number of validations that need to be performed here. And out of 4 bullet points that are outlined here, it's actually not the full test case. The full test case is much longer than that, but this is just some of the examples, right? So out of 4 test cases, only 25% can be covered by what the functionality that Appium can provide. You can provide that your input element exists in DOM, right? Because Appium has a recognition for native objects as well as DOM objects. But you don't know what happens on screen. So you cannot validate that the button is visible, which is a very important use case for especially responsive mobile applications, responsive web applications. These applications tend to behave differently, and the objects on screen behave differently depending on the orientation of the device, or the size of the device, or the version of the operating system in the browser that is being used. So it's very important that you can kind of validate that not just the objects exist in the DOM, but also that they are visible to the user. Oftentimes these objects get abstracted, and it's very difficult to kind of get access to them. Then you also need to validate that the screen renders within acceptable time based on different connectivity profiles. And also validate that we're showing an informative message that is in red color, so the user can right away, by glancing the screen, see that this particular input that they provided is invalid. So in this particular case, you can see that 75% of the test cases cannot actually be covered by Appium out of the box. And then reporting, again, you're kind of on your own as far as reporting is concerned. So what a lot of organizations do, if they use an open source tool like Appium, they will use an open source reporting solution as well. So in this particular case, you're looking at an output of a test that's run with testng. And you can see that if you scroll down somewhere in the bottom, it says that the particular step in the test case failed. This is very difficult to parse visually, and it's very difficult to go through hundreds of these test case output potentially and isolate where exactly in your code there is a potential for a problem, right? So you have a very big haystack, and it's very hard to find the needle of where exactly you should start as a developer your troubleshooting. So these are some of the examples of how Appium limitations are actually affecting the productivity of some of the teams that are using Appium, just purely Appium open source solution without any help from Perfecto. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time next and talk about Perfecto, right? And then I will bring these two themes together and show you what specifically we're doing for Appium. But for those who are not familiar with what we do, Perfecto is a cloud-based continuous quality lab. And we enable application testing and monitoring on the real devices in real user conditions for enterprises that adopt digital transformation and agile delivery processes. This is kind of our bread and butter, and this is really what we're focused on. Now, not to toot our own horn, but we're really recognized leader in this particular industry. And you can see that it's not just simply done based on strategy, right? It's also done based on ability to execute. And you can also see that our closest competitor here is 1/3 of our size in terms of the market footprint. So we're really very well positioned in this industry from the point of view of being in a leadership position. Now, if you look at our platform, it can kind of be broken down in these three main things. So from one perspective is we provide a single lab where you can test your web, mobile, hybrid applications across a variety of real devices as well as web browsers, and we provide one secure cloud that allows you to perform both manual and automated testing, regardless of the browser version, the device type, as well as the environmental user conditions. We also give the ability that we call one script, which is ability to write a single script to test across multiple digital platforms, and we provide a very strong reporting solution that allows you to very quickly zoom in into the problematic areas and find where exactly you need to focus your troubleshooting on. We are also global. So we have 14 data centers across the global, and these data centers are really state-of-the-art. So here's a few screenshots for you, but you can see that we have a 24/7 NOC that provides that enterprise-grade support to our customers, as well as devices that are really difficult to replicate in an on-premise setup, just because they're hard to get into the data centers, such as GPS extenders, Wi-Fi repeaters, cellular extenders. So all of these things are, again, it's our bread and butter. This is something that we provide to our customers as part of our service. So we provide that foundational enterprise-grade lab that is necessary to drive the high percentage of automation. So going a little bit further and closer a little bit to Appium, we actually built our architecture in an open and integrated fashion. So you can integrate Perfecto and call Perfecto from a variety of tools and platforms that are available out there. Obviously, Appium and Selenium are the first-class citizens in this particular area, but it's also things that developers use for coding, Eclipse, Xcode, Visual Studio, a variety of different languages, as well as a number of different, continuous integration systems. I picked just a few tools, not to make this slide really busy, because if I put here everything that we actually integrate with, I probably would run out of space. But a variety of different tools. So like if you're using Jira, for instance, or HP ALM, or Splunk for reporting, all of these things we integrate with. They just, I'm not throwing here them on the slide, but there is rarely a technology out there that is part of this overall SDLC continuum that we don't integrate with. Now, what are we doing specifically when it comes to Appium? So I mentioned that, Appium provides a number of different capabilities, right? So it's open source, it's iOS and Android, it provides a native and DOM object recognition, as well as it integrates with a variety of CI systems. So we overlaid what we called an enterprise extensions on top of these core Appium platform. We essentially took Appium and we fixed a whole bunch of stuff in it, and we also added additional capabilities that it's lacking. So what did we do specifically? Well, first of all, we introduced capabilities that allow our customers to achieve high percentage of automation, such as system-level control, image injection, OCR, and image object recognition, as well as the rich reporting engine. We also added capabilities to mimic real user environments, such as GPS injection, network virtualization, persona-based testing. I'll talk about this specific aspect of it in more detail because it's very important. And then we'll also provide the hybrid cloud with global coverage. So the hybrid cloud component basically means that you can run our cloud in our data centers, or you can run your cloud in our data centers, or on customer premises, as well as a hybrid type of setup. And then on top of all this, we're essentially adding that enterprise-grade security, 24/7 support, on-demand scale, as well as a role-based access control. So really, we've extended Appium significantly by, very heavily fixing the problems that it has, and also expanding its capabilities into the full digital testing that our customers demand. So what are some of the benefits of using Appium with Perfecto? Well, they're numerous, but I kind of picked a few that, in my opinion, are the most important. So first of all, this combination gives you reliable, unattended parallel automation. So first of all, you can reuse the same Appium scripts that your customers already have, right? So if there is an automation team that is already using Appium, there is usually none to very minimal changes that need to be done to those scripts in order for them to be able to run on Perfecto. And that is a huge time saver, right? So if there is a team that produces, for instance, has an application that requires GPS location mocking and testing under a variety of end user conditions, they can start leveraging their functional tests that they've already written in Appium in Perfecto pretty much overnight. Then we also fixed a whole bunch of Appium and Selenium defects, and that caused the failed execution. And when you execute on Perfecto Appium, it's actually very robust, and it's done in a parallel and an unattended fashion, because essentially there is no failures that are happening during execution related to the bugs and problems that the open source Appium has. And then we also have introduced the OS level and environmental controls. So you can really interact with anything on screen, testing real user interaction, right? So now you should be able to test for things like, is that button actually appear on screen or not? Can the user reach that particular control? You can also test pop-ups, incoming calls, SMS, other types of interaction. So if the application requires some type of interaction with maybe other apps, or some other type of scenarios, then you can very easily test for those types of conditions. And Nick actually will show you some of that in the demo. You have the full ability to test under a variety of real environmental conditions, so we'll talk about that in more detail shortly. And then you can also accelerate tester and developer productivity. So our reporting engine is integrated with the solution, and anytime a test runs on Appium, you can provide not simply a pass or fail status, but you can enrich that result of that test with screenshots, videos, the device level and application level analytics, and all of this really helps testers and developers very quickly identify where they need to focus their efforts in terms of finding the piece of code that potentially caused these problems. And then we have plugins for most popular IDEs out there. So if you are an automation tester that's developing in Java, scripts for Appium, we actually have plugin that allows you to test your script seamlessly on Perfecto without ever leaving the IDE. So your productivity, there's a huge productivity boost that comes from that. Needless to say, we provide extended enterprise support model, and we provide OS beta support and the same-day support for GA versions. So when the iOS 10 came out, we had support from the automation perspective on day one when it hit GA, and we even had support for the beta versions prior to that. So if you're a customer of Perfecto, if you're using Appium, you can leverage all of these benefits and start testing on iOS 10 or other versions of the operating systems before they even hit GA. So here's the example, right? With Perfecto, this particular use case that we've covered can be tested for all of these various conditions that are outlined here. So that leads to being able to achieve a much higher percentage of automation in terms of the full test case coverage. Another very important component, so I mentioned this sort of notion of persona-based testing. What we did is we actually allow you to take a functional test case and overlay non-functional conditions, such as a carrier that you are connected to, or the type of network and the strength of the network, a geographic location and type of the phone, maybe some of the background apps that you are running, and then suddenly rerun that test that is purely functional under a variety of these conditions to really see how your application will behave in a real world type of scenario. And we map these various conditions into the notion of persona, which is really somebody who possesses a certain type of phone and it has a certain usage of mobile patterns, right? So now you can kind of go to your marketing organization, which typically defines the various personas, and you can map the technical components of those to those personas and then test for a particular persona. So we provide a library of personas out of the box that you can test on, and you can also create, modify, and have your own as well. Now, as I mentioned, the solution, Perfecto solution, also comes with a very robust built-in reporting engine that helps you kind of understand the high-level digital quality trends and very quickly narrow down into the problematic area. So you're seeing, a screenshot of this particular test run that happened here, and you can see that you can actually sort these different test runs and filter them based on the operating systems, based on, various sort of combinations of devices and the test types that you ran. And you can very quickly answer high-level questions based on that. So you can say, okay, I'm testing a web application. Does this web application work on Chrome only? And or does this test application, has some issues on Chrome across maybe a variety of different operating systems? So that helps you to narrow down where in your code you should start looking at in order to be able to kind of focus your troubleshooting. Now, once you understand these digital trends at a high level, and by the way, executives love this type of executive dashboards, right? Like this high-level view, because it helps them understand the trend of quality over time. It helps them really kind of zoom in and, at a high level understand how they're performing, if the quality, overall quality is improving, or are there some problematic areas that they need to invest some time and effort in. And then for the actual testers and developers, we provide a very granular report, excuse me, that, on the left-hand side, you can see that this is essentially a list of test steps that were executed. And then in the middle, you see all of the different device vitals and statistics. So you can say, when this particular test case was executed on this step, it failed, and you can understand what was happening with Wi-Fi and CPU and memory utilization at that given time. And this data is extremely granular. So it can help developers really understand if their application is maybe consuming too much memory, and this is why it's having problems and specific test cases fail, or if the problem is elsewhere. And then on the right-hand side, you also see this is a video. So anytime when the test is executed, we're capturing screenshots as well as videos. So imagine you're a developer and you got a bug report that was sent to you in an ALM system. You can very quickly go and review this particular report, and you don't even necessarily need to reproduce the issue on the device. You can just simply click on video and see exactly what happened when that test failed. That's a huge productivity boost for any developer and tester. Another thing before I sort of wrap up here with the presentation, before we transition with the demo, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the fact that there's a couple of approaches that you can take, right? So on the right-hand side, you can build your automation pipeline without Perfecto, right? You can still have continuous integration and automation scripts in the framework, and then you would code against Appium and Selenium and use some type of in-house or third-party lab. But I'm hoping that you saw that in this presentation, that you have an alternative way, which is really you can leverage the Perfecto platform and you can leverage these Perfecto enterprise extensions. And what we found is that there is a profound impact on the amount of automation that you can accomplish with Perfecto and without Perfecto in this particular scenario, right? So in many cases, we see that customers struggle achieving more than 50% of automation. And this is because of the limitations in terms of the capabilities that open source Appium provides. With Perfecto, they can automate pretty much everything, with the exception of maybe a few really stubborn use cases that do require human interaction. From the business perspective, that difference between 50% and below and 90% is plus is actually very significant, because that's the manual labor that you don't need to necessarily spend if you achieve those high percentage of automation. So that's all at a high level in terms of our capabilities, and at this point we'll transition into demo, and Nick can really show you how this actually looks and feels when the real test case has been executed with the real application.
All right, thanks, Max. So I need to have, I'm now the presenter.
Yeah, I'm passing the presenter right to you.
Great, okay. So to start off, can everybody see my screen? Can you see it, Max?
Yeah, we can see it, Nick.
Okay, great. To start off first, one thing I wanted to mention before we got into this demo, when talking about Appium, in particular with iOS 10, I know, Max, you had mentioned that Appium is now supported with iOS 10, and that is true. However, there's a lot of limitations still with the open source Appium project with regards to iOS 10. There's just to name off a couple. You're not the iDevice installer, which basically installs the app at runtime, doesn't work. So there's a few laborious workarounds, but it doesn't work like it does for older versions of iOS. A lot of the same features are also not working on iOS 10, like some gestures, auto accepting alerts. Certain device interactions as well with the XE test driver just are still not supported yet, even though it will work. A lot of times, many of your existing tests in Appium may not function with base Appium. I know a few customers that I've talked to recently said it doesn't work to the point where they cannot use it. And also it's not backwards compatible with iOS 8, so you're having to manage a much bigger enterprise setup to be able to run devices on iOS 8 devices as well as iOS 10 devices. It gets really really interesting trying to set all that up. So just to wrap, I wanted to wrap that in. And one of the main things while I'm about to pull this up that I also wanted to mention with the specifically Apple support, but you also have the same thing with Android. Max had mentioned the accepting of system level pop-ups. In Appium, you do have the option to auto accept all the alerts or to not interact with them at all. And so with newer OSs, you get permission pop-ups for the camera and for the microphone and different hardware controls. And just one example that I had specifically was I was auto accepting all the alerts, and this was at a previous job running base Appium. And one of our nightly regression runs, the pop-up came on the iOS that asked to upgrade the OS instead of just the camera and the permissions pop-ups I was expecting, and I upgraded the OS. And of course, the test failed. We had a lot of red on the build the next morning, all because we were blindly accepting pop-ups. And so with Perfecto, what you're able to do is accept only the pop-ups you're expecting, and then we would have just failed the one test instead of failing everything because the device OS was installed. So with that, another thing, and excuse me, I'm in a coffee shop now, so I did a video of this just to show the same thing. But this is another example, and I'll fast forward this. This is a Jenkins setup, and kicking off something that previously would be impossible to do with base Appium, and that is a two-factor authentication test. So we're logging in on a website, and I kicked this off via Jenkins, but it brings up a browser and a mobile device. As we log in, we will get a code sent to the device, and it will then input that code into the browser to log in. And then you're seeing it captured all there in the Jenkins log as it's running. So the value here, and this is just one example, one that I wanted to show, is this is impossible. These types of scenarios are impossible to do within the context of your app only. So with Perfecto, getting the ability to have that total device control adds so much to Appium because you have all your basic suite of Appium tests that can run, and then you have all these extra scenarios that before were required to do manually, or worse yet, they just weren't done because they couldn't be automated. And so that's really the big value here is we're able to automate scenarios that previously either were never run or had to be done manually and just took so much time and effort to do. So you're seeing, and I guess we already did that. I was not watching the screen as it went, but we pulled the code off of the device, entered it in the website, and this is one script that's driving both this cross-platform browser and device test. So actually, here I'm going to stop this and slide over. So the next piece, that's just in a two-factor authentication setup. But in the next piece here, let me slide over. Oh, and here we are. I'm sorry. So this is the report setup, and I know Max showed a little bit of this earlier, but you can see kind of a high-level view here, executive report, how many tests passed, failed, out of the total, and then a historical view here, what it looked like over the last few months. And that's kind of the high level, and then we kind of get down into more specifics. Here we see dates, we see different devices, different tests being executed across different OSs. Let's get into some failures there because they're more fun. Here, I'll just dig in here. So you can see this is on a tablet. Looks like it couldn't find an element. And so you get a failure there, you can get a video playback, and then a stack trace here that shows what exactly happened. And then actually let me narrow my search down here. So here was a scenario that I ran earlier today, and saying this is a passing scenario, but you can see here in the left-hand side we have all the different steps that happened as a part of this test, and we can dive in and see what steps actually happened. Whether we were clicking an image button, whether we're setting text, and then you see a video here as of the test that happened. And then in addition to that, you have an even more detailed report right here, just a link to it. And this is, Max showed earlier. So we set a set of predefined capabilities, a user persona of this person. So saying they're in New York, they have a handful of apps running in the background, and their network is poor. And so all that's automated, wrapped up into a persona. It's a one-line code change to input here. This is some advantages. You don't get this in Appium. You can set the network as one, 25K across the whole test, or however you want to set it. Versus here, it can vary at different points in the test. And we can see here the CPU, the memory, network. This is a tablet, so it didn't have the cell service up and down. But that gives you a good idea. At different points in the test, shows you what's going on CPU-wise, memory-wise, and data in and out-wise. So really specific test, and of course, another video here that you could play back of the devices that's going on. Again, here on the left-hand side, all the different actions that happened throughout the test that would show up red if there was a failure. So really deep level here, and then going back, really a high-level view. And this type of reporting, is very beneficial and plugs straight into Appium, but you don't get any of this just using Appium. This is all stuff that Perfecto has developed to go alongside Appium and really provide much more value to the suite as a whole.
Thank you both, Max and Nick. This was a great presentation. Hope everyone has a nice day.